The sun had barely broken over Leru Mesa when the dust rose like smoke from the sheriff's post. In that early light, a Navajo warrior named Talon stood before the gallows, his shadow long against the sand. A woman knelt beside the hanging post, wrists tied, face swollen from tears. Her name was Marianne Beaumont, the French widow of a trader who died owing debts he could never repay. The sheriff spat, his golden tooth flashing. "Her life's the price for his lies," he said. The crowd muttered. Talon said nothing. Then, in one quiet motion, he untied the reins of his stallion, a roan named Aspirit, and spoke softly. "I trade him for her freedom." The crowd fell still. The horse was legend. No one in 4 territories could touch him without fear. The sheriff laughed, thinking it a trick, until Talon laid the reins in his hands. "You'll let her go," the warrior said. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "For this beast? Done." He sliced Marianne's ropes with his knife, and she crumpled into the dust. Her freedom bought by a stranger's soul. Talon turned without another word, his hair whipping in the wind. Behind him, the sheriff called, "You just gave up your only way out of this desert." Talon didn't look back. "I was never leaving," he said. Marianne watched him go, unable to move. She didn't understand why a man who owed her nothing would give away the one thing he could never replace. When he disappeared over the ridge, she felt something shift inside her chest, something between gratitude and grief. The sheriff led the horse away, grinning like a man who thought he'd just robbed fate. But the wind that morning carried a strange sound, a low, trembling cry, half horse, half ghost. And though no one noticed, even the vultures circling above stopped for a heartbeat to listen. By dusk, Talon was gone. No camp, no sign, no trail but one, a single handprint pressed into the sand where he had stood. Some said it was just dust. Others swore they heard drums in the wind that night, a song older than memory. Marianne sat awake long after the town had gone quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, calm, unbroken, and fading into the dawn. 2 nights before that trade, Marianne had knelt before the sheriff's desk, begging. Her husband's death had left her with nothing but unpaid loans and an empty house. "Please," she whispered, "I'll work, I'll pay you back." But the sheriff only leaned back and smirked. "Debt don't care about promises, darling. Only payment." He stood, walking slow around her like a wolf circling prey. "Maybe there's another way." When she refused, he struck her. The bruise had not yet faded when Talon arrived in town. Talon's story was carved from Lost too. His people were gone, scattered when soldiers burned their camp along the San Juan. He carried a pouch of ashes from that night, tied to his belt. The only thing that ever made sense after that was Ash Spirit. The horse was born from the smoke of that same fire, found wild and bleeding in the desert. To trade him was to trade the last living piece of home he had. But when Talon saw Marianne in the square that morning, bound and shaking in the dust, something inside him cracked. Not pity, but recognition. Pain knows its own reflection. That evening, after her release, Marianne tried to find him. The town refused to speak his name. They called him the Ghost Rider, the fool who bartered with death. She followed his trail beyond the mesa, where the desert stretched wide and empty. There, she found a faint mark of hooves. Then, nothing, he had vanished into the earth. Marianne sank to her knees and whispered, "Why me?" The wind answered with the faintest whisper, "Because you still believe in mercy." Back in town, the sheriff strutted through the saloon, boasting of his trade. "A dumb savage and a fine horse, all for a woman who ain't worth salt," he laughed. His men cheered, too drunk to notice the storm clouds gathering in the east. Outside, the horizon glowed red, and thunder rolled low across the mesas like the growl of something ancient waking from sleep. That night, Ash Spirit broke through the corral. He ran wild through the storm, kicking loose every lock, every chain. By morning, the sheriff's prize was gone, and on the gate post, burned into the wood by lightning, was a blackened mark, a single handprint, ringed in ash. Talon rode east into the desert, the wind whipping his hair and cloak like the fingers of ghosts. Ash Spirit's hooves kicked up sparks of stone against the canyon walls, carrying them far into the vast silence. Talon's shoulder throbbed from the bruise he'd barely noticed, but the desert offered no pause. Each mile he rode felt like a step away from death, and a step closer to something he could not yet name. The mesas seemed alive, murmuring warnings in the language of wind and stone. Marianne, back in Leroux Mesa, couldn't stop thinking of him. Something in her gut whispered he had not disappeared entirely, that he had left a trace meant only for her to follow. She gathered what little she could carry, a small satchel of water, her father's compass, and the revolver her husband once carried. Her heart pounded with fear, but also determination. I have to find him, she told herself. He gave everything for me. I cannot do nothing in return. Talon did not know the town was waking. The sheriff's men had mounted a hunt, 10 riders deep, armed and angry, tracing hoofprints and footprints through the sandstone valleys. They cursed at the desert, underestimating it as a lifeless expanse. But Talon knew better. He led as spirit along hidden gullies and ridges only he could read, leaving false trails, twisting paths, and stones balanced to mislead their eyes. The canyon seemed to conspire with him, shrouding his escape in shadows. By nightfall, Talon found a hollow with a stream trickling through red rock. He let as spirit drink, running his hands along the stallion's flanks as if grounding himself. The desert had taken much from him, family, home, songs, but it had not taken honor. "You are free, old friend," he whispered to the horse. "And she is free, too." He pressed a hand to the date, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him, and closed his eyes to listen. Somewhere far away, Marianne's heartbeat mirrored his own. Sleep was brief and uneasy. A shadow moved among the rocks, one of the sheriff's men, scouting under the moonlight. Talon sensed him, as if the desert itself had whispered. He rose, knife in hand, and melted into darkness. The pursuit had begun, and the desert would judge them all. The sheriff woke to a quiet town, unaware that Talon's tracks had already disappeared into the horizon. His rage boiled as he saw the empty corral where a spirit had been kept. "He thinks he can outsmart me," he spat. He gathered his 10 men and sent them east, riding fast, guns ready, cursing every stone and cactus in their path. The desert offered no mercy, but the sheriff expected none either. Talon waited atop a ridge, silent as the canyon itself. The hoofbeats echoed below, distant but growing. He studied the hunters, noting every twitch, every gesture. A slight wind blew sand into their eyes. Talon's voice was low and calm as he whispered to Ashpirit, "They follow the wrong shadows. Let them chase ghosts tonight." With a sudden movement, he dropped down a narrow cliff path, scattering rocks that tumbled and slowed the sheriff's men. One rider fell, curses swallowed by the canyon's hollow mouth. Marianne, hearing rumors of the pursuit, felt fear gnaw at her. She had no way to reach him yet, but she could not remain still. She packed provisions and followed the faintest trail east, guided by instinct. The desert was dangerous. Snakes, heat, and bandits, yet something stronger pulled her forward. Every whisper of wind seemed to carry his presence. Every rustle in the sand reminded her that he was still alive. Night fell, and the chase became deadly. Talon's knowledge of the terrain gave him advantage, but the sheriff's men were relentless. One rider tried to flank him along the canyon wall. A single shot echoed. The man screamed, falling into the darkness. Talon didn't look back. Violence was never the goal, but survival demanded it. The canyon watched, ancient and silent, as blood marked the red stones. By dawn, the pursuit paused. The hunters were scattered, battered, exhausted. Talon's body ached, yet he felt no relief. The desert still whispered of dangers ahead. Marianne's journey was beginning, and he knew paths would cross, but not yet. In the quiet, he pressed his hand into the dirt and listened. The desert, vast and endless, seemed to hum, "Your choices echo forever." Talon rode deep into the canyon, guided by memory and instinct. The walls rose high, jagged and red, shadowed like the hollows of old spirits. At the canyon's heart lay a hidden cave, known only to his ancestors, a place where echoes carried secrets and the wind sang ancient songs. He dismounted, letting our spirit drink at a hidden spring. The desert had taken so much from him, yet it had given him this sanctuary, where silence could heal and thoughts could breathe. Marianne, following faint trails of hoofprints and disturbed sand, finally reached the canyon's edge. She called his name, voice trembling, half afraid he might vanish like a ghost. The wind carried her plea through the stone corridors. Talon heard it, his heart tightening. He had traded everything for her freedom, and now, perhaps, fate allowed them a brief crossing of paths. He stepped from shadow into the faint light, and their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them, stronger than words. But the sheriff had anticipated the reunion. From a canyon rim, his men advanced, rifles glinting in the morning sun. Talon could hear their hooves and shouts echoing through the walls. He didn't flinch. He never had. The cave was narrow, the perfect place for those who knew it well to outmaneuver the careless and greedy. Talon whispered to Marianne, "Stay behind me. Trust the stone as you would trust me." She nodded, gripping the revolver in her trembling hands. The first shots rang out, ricocheting off the rock walls like thunder. Talon moved with silent precision, dodging bullets, striking only when necessary. One of the sheriff's men fell, tumbling into a shallow chasm, and the echo of his scream mingled with the wind's ancient song. Marianne's heart pounded as she realized how deeply she feared losing him. Not again, not after he had already given her life for nothing in return. By nightfall, the sheriff's men were exhausted, bleeding, and defeated by the canyon's labyrinth. Talon's knowledge of the terrain had turned the hunters into prey. The canyon was silent once more, save for the echoes of wind and water. Talon knelt, pressing his hand into the stone floor, whispering prayers to ancestors long gone. Marianne stepped beside him, and for the first time, words were unnecessary. The desert had witnessed their survival. It had seen mercy and sacrifice, and it whispered approval in a language older than man. The next morning, the canyon glowed golden, as though the sun itself honored their struggle. Marianne awoke to Talon already gone, a note scratched into a stone with a piece of obsidian. "You are free. Live fully. Remember only kindness, not my name." Tears burned her cheeks. She ran to the canyon's edge, scanning for him, but the warrior and her spirit had vanished like a dream, swallowed by the desert's endless horizon. She realized in the depth of his sacrifice. Talon had given her life at the cost of his own presence. The desert demanded nothing less from those who truly understood honor, and he had accepted it willingly. Marianne clutched the note, feeling the echo of his courage within her. The pain of loss intertwined with hope, a strange, ancient truth that some lives touch others and vanish, leaving only echoes. Back in Leroux Mesa, the sheriff returned, empty-handed and furious. His power had crumbled without Talon or the horse. Townsfolk whispered of the ghost rider, of how one man had defied greed and death alike. Marianne left the town that very day, her husband's revolver strapped to her belt and the courage Talon had inspired burning in her chest. She moved east, toward the rising sun, carrying his gift, freedom, as both a blessing and a burden. Years later, travelers spoke of a woman who walked the deserts alone, never faltering, her path guided by a warrior who had vanished at dawn. And sometimes, when the wind blew across the red stones, they said the faint echo of hooves could be heard, followed by the soft, steady whisper of a voice that reminded the living of mercy, courage, and sacrifice. In the end, Talon's story became legend, not because he sought glory or recognition, but because he had understood something ancient. The greatest power a person can give is the freedom of another soul, and the most lasting echoes are left by those who vanish without a sound. Marianne's heart remembered him always, and the desert remembered, too, silent, endless, and eternal.